Think about the person you are right now, your fears, the way you react when someone criticizes you, the kind of people you're drawn to, the thing you do when you're overwhelmed. Now ask yourself, when did you choose any of that? You didn't. It was chosen for you. In years you don't remember, by people who didn't know what they were doing, and it's been running your life ever since. Most people spend their entire adult lives trying to change. Therapy, journaling, self-help books stacked on nightstands, new habits, new cities, new relationships. And some of it works, pieces of it. But there's a reason it's so hard. A reason nobody tells you when you're sitting across from a therapist trying to figure out why you keep doing the same things. The version of you that causes most of your problems was finished before you started school. In the 1990s, a Harvard neuroscientist named Jack Shonkoff began compiling decades of research on early childhood development into a single framework. What he found was uncomfortable. By the time a child turns 5, over 1 million new neural connections form in their brain every single second. Every second. The architecture being built during those years, the circuits that govern emotional regulation, stress response, impulse control, the capacity for trust, gets wired in with a permanence that nothing else in human development comes close to matching. Shonkoff called the early years a sensitive period, a window where the brain is so open to input, so hungry to learn the rules of the world, that everything lands differently than it ever will again. But here's the part that changes how you see everything. The brain doesn't just record experiences during this window, it builds predictions. Every time something happens to a child, every time they cry and someone comes, every time they reach out and no one is there, every time the world feels safe or threatening or unpredictable, the brain takes notes. It is not storing memories, it is building a model, a working theory of how the world operates and what a person has to do to survive inside it. And that model becomes the lens through which every experience for the rest of your life gets filtered. This is what psychologists call internal working models, and the research behind them is difficult to sit with. In the 1970s, developmental psychologist Mary Ainsworth ran a simple experiment called the strange situation. She placed toddlers in a room with their mother, then briefly separated them, then reunited them. What she was measuring wasn't how the children reacted to the separation, it was how they reacted to the return. Some children ran to their mothers immediately, comforted quickly, reset fast. Others clung desperately and couldn't be soothed even after the mother came back. Others did something stranger. They didn't react at all. They had already learned that reaching out didn't help, so they stopped reaching. Ainsworth called these attachment styles: secure, anxious, avoidant. And what the decades of research that followed demonstrated is that the attachment style a child develops before the age of 2 predicts, with unsettling accuracy, how they will behave in romantic relationships 30 years later, how they will handle conflict, whether they will ask for help or disappear when things get hard, whether intimacy feels safe or suffocating. The 2-year-old you were is still in the room every time you get close to someone. But that's only half the story. Stress, the part of your nervous system that decides whether something is dangerous, whether you need to fight, flee, or go completely still, gets calibrated almost entirely in the first years of life. In 1998, researcher Vincent Folletti published what became one of the most cited studies in modern medicine, the Adverse Childhood Experiences Study. Over 17,000 participants. He was looking at the long-term health effects of childhood stress. What he found shook the medical establishment. Adults who had experienced high levels of stress before the age of 5 had significantly elevated rates of heart disease, depression, anxiety, addiction, and autoimmune disorders decades later. Not because they remembered the stress, because their nervous systems had been built inside it. Your body is still responding to a world that no longer exists, a world you don't even remember living in. The threat level your nervous system was calibrated to before you could form a conscious memory is still the threat level it operates at today. You can know intellectually that you're safe. Your nervous system was wired before intellect existed. It doesn't care what you know. It only knows what it learned. And here is the part that's hardest to look at directly. The people who built that model for you had no idea they were doing it. Your parents, your caregivers, the adults in your earliest world. They weren't architects making deliberate choices. They were people, carrying their own models, built in their own forgotten years, by their own parents who never knew what they were building either. The anxiety your mother couldn't hide, the way your father handled anger, the silences, the warmth, the chaos, the steadiness. None of it was aimed at you. All of it shaped you. And they will never fully know how. And neither will you, not entirely. Because it didn't happen as memory. It happened as architecture. It shows up not as something you recall, but as something you are. The way you flinch before someone finishes a sentence. The relationships you keep choosing without knowing why. The version of yourself that appears without warning when the pressure gets high enough. That's not you making a choice. That's the model running. The one built in years you can't reach, by hands that didn't know they were building anything at all. So what do you do with that? The brain is not static. The connections built in those early years are among the most stubborn structures in the human nervous system. But they are not stone. Neuroscience calls it neuroplasticity. Under the right conditions, with the right sustained pressure, new pathways form, not over the old ones, alongside them. You don't erase the model, you build a second one, slowly, imperfectly, one moment of awareness at a time. The gap between the trigger and the response, that half second before you run the program, is where everything lives. It starts as nothing, almost too small to notice, but it grows. That gap is the only place change actually happens. And every time you catch it, you make it slightly wider. Think about the person you are right now, your fears, the way you react when someone gets too close or too critical or too far away. You didn't choose any of it, but you are the only one who can decide what happens next. The most important years of your life are already behind you. What you do inside what they built, that part isn't over yet.